What ancient humans actually did after dark. Tonight you'll climb into bed, pull up the covers, scroll your phone for half an hour, wander to the kitchen twice for no real reason, and eventually drift off. Routine. Almost cozy if you think about it. Now strip all of that away. No blanket, no phone, no bed, no walls, no kitchen. Just you, a dark forest, an animal hide over your shoulders, and something big moving through the undergrowth 20 feet away. That was an ordinary Tuesday for our ancestors. And here's the question almost nobody asks. What did they actually do once the sun went down? When the world turned pitch black, predators woke up, and your entire toolkit was a sharpened rock and a stubborn hope that things would work out? Did they sleep? Sit frozen, waiting for daylight like some prehistoric version of a person waiting on a delayed delivery? We spend a third of our lives asleep, yet we almost never stop to consider how wildly different that experience was for 99% of human history. The real answer turns out to be far stranger and far more human than you'd expect. Night before fire. Before humans had fire under control, before tools worth mentioning, before anything resembling civilization, there was one simple, terrifying fact. Roughly half of every day passed in total darkness. Not street light leaking through the curtains darkness. Not phone died, can't find the light switch darkness. The kind where you hold your hand in front of your face and see absolutely nothing, where every snapping twig might as well be a death sentence. And in that darkness, things hunted. Lions, hyenas, leopards, saber-toothed cats. Nearly every major predator of the ancient world was most active at dusk, dawn, or through the night. The moment the sun dropped, humans stopped being the hunters and became a fairly convenient meal for something with far better night vision. The forecast never needed a weather app, dark with a strong chance of being eaten. So people grouped together, sought higher ground, found spaces easy to defend. A cave wasn't valuable for its charm. It was valuable because it had exactly one entrance. Put your back to the rock and you always know where danger has to come from. It was, in effect, the very first security system. No key card required, but then again, leopards don't carry key cards either. Groups slept pressed close, sharing warmth, close enough to hear each other's breathing, close enough to know instantly if something was wrong. It wasn't cozy in any modern sense, but there was real safety in numbers. Someone was always a lighter sleeper. Someone always stirred first. Someone was effectively standing watch without ever being asked to. Then fire changed everything. Around 400,000 years ago, that changed. Humans gained reliable control of fire, and the entire rhythm of the night shifted. Fire didn't just provide warmth or make food easier to digest, though both mattered enormously. It created a boundary, a circle of light, a psychological wall between people in the dark that was somehow both imaginary and completely real. Most large predators avoid firelight, not because flame physically repels them, but because they evolved to hunt in darkness. And an open fire is simply a disruption their instincts don't know how to handle. But the more interesting part is this. Fire didn't just keep predators away, it reshaped what human beings actually became. Around a fire, you can't really get things done in the modern sense. You can't write reports or send emails. What you can do is sit, look at one another, and be fully present with the people around you. Researchers studying modern hunter-gatherer societies, groups like the Jew/Hwansi of the Kalahari or the Hadza of Tanzania, notice something striking. Daytime conversation is almost entirely practical. Who's hunting where? What needs gathering? Basic coordination. But at night, around the fire, everything shifts. People tell stories, long, emotionally rich stories about ancestors, about how the world began, about what it means to be brave or generous or worth knowing. By some estimates, roughly 80% of nighttime conversation in these communities is storytelling, compared to only about 6% during daylight hours. Night after night, for tens of thousands of years, People gathered by the fire and narrated the world to one another, essentially doing what we now do with novels, films, and streaming shows, making sense of existence through character and consequence. The campfire was the cinema. The storyteller was the screen. And this mattered enormously because stories are how culture actually gets transmitted, how values, history, and identity survive across generations without any written record. Fire may not just have kept early humans alive, it may have been one of the single biggest catalysts behind language, empathy, and complex social bonding in our entire evolutionary history. Not bad for people wrapped in animal skins. Sleeping in two parts. Now about sleep, because this is where things get genuinely strange, and it might change how you feel about waking up at 3 a.m. Most of us assume the normal, healthy way to sleep is 8 uninterrupted hours in one straight block. Wake up at 3 a.m. and can't fall back asleep? We assume something's wrong, start Googling symptoms, and by 4 a.m. we've diagnosed ourselves with 3 disorders and a rare vitamin deficiency. Turns out that assumption may be historically backwards. The historian Roger E. Kurtz spent decades combing through diaries, medical texts, court records, and household accounts, and found something remarkable. For most of human history, going back at least to medieval times, and likely much further, people didn't sleep in one block. They slept in 2, known as first sleep and second sleep. You'd go to bed a couple of hours after dark, sleep 3 or 4 hours, then wake up naturally, calmly, the way you might surface from a pleasant nap, and stay awake for an hour or 2 before drifting back off until morning. This isn't speculation. References appear as far back as Homer's Odyssey. Roman writers mentioned it as casually as we'd mention breakfast. Medieval literature is full of it. One 16th century French physician even recommended couples conceive children specifically during that waking window, since the body was warm, relaxed, and the mind unusually clear. The old phrase, the watch of the night, found throughout historical texts in scripture, doesn't always mean a military guard. Very often it simply describes ordinary people being awake in the dark during that gap between sleeps. And what did they do with that time? Almost everything. They prayed. In many traditions, the quiet hours between midnight and dawn were considered the most sacred window for connecting with the divine. They reflected on their dreams, taken far more seriously as meaningful information back then. They had sex, considered an excellent time for it, with the body relaxed and nowhere else to be. They tended the fire, checked on livestock, nursed infants, and sometimes even wandered over to visit neighbors in the dark, with nothing unusual about it at all. It wasn't insomnia. It wasn't a disorder. It was simply the night behaving the way it always had, in phases. The pattern likely collapsed because of artificial light. First gas lamps, then electricity, allowed bedtimes to creep later and later, compressing total sleep time until the natural gap between the 2 sleeps vanished into one long block. And that's exactly why waking at 3 a.m. now feels like malfunction instead of an ancient, entirely normal rhythm reasserting itself. So if you've ever woken up in the middle of the night feeling calm and unusually clear-headed, lying there thinking for a while before drifting peacefully back to sleep, congratulations. You're not broken, not anxious, not developing some disorder. You are quite literally doing something prehistoric. Your body simply remembered something it was never supposed to forget. Engineering a better night's rest. Let's go back even further, because the deeper you dig, the more sophisticated ancient sleep habits become. Early Homo sapiens didn't have beds, obviously, but they also weren't simply collapsing onto bare rock. Archaeological evidence from Border Cave in South Africa shows that as far back as 200,000 years ago, people were deliberately constructing sleeping platforms, carefully layered grasses, and selected plant material. And beneath those layers, researchers found ash. Not accidental leftover ash from a nearby fire, but ash spread on purpose. Why? Because ash repels insects, ticks, fleas, mites, the things that bite while you sleep and spread disease. Someone, 200,000 years ago, noticed the connection, tested it, confirmed it worked, and passed the knowledge on. That's the scientific method, running quietly inside a prehistoric mind, applied to the simple problem of sleeping more comfortably. In colder regions, Ice Age Europe and Central Asia, the challenge shifted from insects to cold severe enough to kill an unprotected person within hours. The answer was communal sleeping, groups pressed together, sharing body heat as a kind of living insulation system. That wasn't purely social bonding, it was basic thermal physics. More bodies in an enclosed space meant a higher ambient temperature, which meant survival. And certain individuals were naturally lighter sleepers, quicker to wake, likely an evolved trait, since a group that all slept equally deeply was a group more likely to get eaten. A group with a spread of sleep depths effectively had rotating centuries without anyone needing to volunteer for the job. The sacred night. For nearly every ancient culture on Earth, night was the most spiritually charged part of the entire day. The logic makes intuitive sense. The sun, the source of warmth and visibility, quite literally died every evening, sinking below the horizon. In countless cosmologies, it descended into an underworld and had to fight its way back. Every sunrise was a victory. Every night was a vigil. The Maya built entire calendar systems around celestial movements visible only at night. Their cities, Chichen Itza, Uxmal, Palenque, were architecturally aligned with specific star and planetary positions. The observatory at Chichen Itza tracked Venus, visible only at dawn and dusk, with remarkable precision. Venus was associated with Quetzalcoatl and helped guide decisions about war. The night sky wasn't decoration. It functioned as a political and military intelligence system. Priests carried out rituals deep in the night specifically to help ensure the sun completed its underworld journey and rose again. From the outside, it looks like mythology. From the inside, it looked like essential infrastructure. After all, the sun always did come back. In ancient Mesopotamia, Sumer, Babylon, Assyria, specialized scholar priests devoted themselves to reading the night sky for omens. A comet meant something, a lunar eclipse carried a message for the king, planetary movement indicated when to plant crops or go to war. The methodology may have been flawed, but the underlying instinct was genuinely scientific, a serious attempt to find patterns in nature and use them to make better decisions. Polynesian navigators pulled off something almost hard to believe even now. With no compass, no charts, no instruments of any kind, they crossed the largest ocean on Earth in wooden outrigger canoes, locating tiny islands scattered across an expanse bigger than every landmass on the planet combined. And they did most of this navigating at night. They'd memorized the rising and setting points of hundreds of stars across different seasons and latitudes, learned to feel ocean swells with their bodies, even without seeing where they originated, watched birds flying toward land at dusk, and read cloud formations that tend to gather over islands. The night sky was their navigation system, arguably more sophisticated in some respects than anything used before GPS. Iron Age metalworkers in what's now Zimbabwe deliberately fired their forges at night, not out of tradition, but because daylight washes out the subtle color shifts in heated metal that reveal its exact temperature. At night, those colors showed with total clarity, turning darkness into a precision instrument. In Mohenjo-Daro, one of the earliest true cities on Earth at over 4,000 years old, sanitation workers collected waste specifically at night, working around the city's sophisticated drainage system on an organized schedule, essentially actual night shifts. In Bronze Age Oman, farmers irrigated crops after dark to cut down on evaporation, a smart water conservation strategy in a dry climate, arrived at through pure observation. And in Scandinavia, where winter nights can stretch 18 to 20 hours, the Vikings lit their longhouses with fish oil and whale fat lamps, refusing to simply surrender to the darkness, and instead continuing to work, socialize, and live through it. The night was never empty. When we picture ancient nights, we imagine something small and frightened. People huddled on rocks, passively enduring the dark while waiting for morning. Night as an absence, a gap between days where nothing happens and nothing counts. But it was exactly the opposite. Night was when people told the stories that became culture, when they slept in two natural phases and woke in the middle to think, to pray, to be near one another, when they kept each other warm against cold that would otherwise have killed them, when priests read the sky for divine messages, when navigators crossed oceans guided only by stars in the feel of the water, when metal workers used darkness to see more clearly, when farmers irrigated fields by moonlight, when the Maya made nightly offerings to bring the sun back, and every single morning the sun kept its end of the bargain. The night wasn't empty. It was full, a different world with its own rules, its own skills, its own kind of meaning, mapped and mastered by human beings over hundreds of thousands of years. We traded most of that away for electric light, and to be fair, that trade was absolutely worth it. Running water, modern medicine, the internet all come with real advantages. But something genuine was lost in how completely we've erased the line between day and night, how thoroughly we've defeated the dark, how little most of us now know about the sky overhead or the natural rhythms of our own bodies left to their own devices. The circle around the fire, the stories told in darkness, biphasic sleep with its strange, clear-headed middle hour, the stars used as a map and a calendar, the simple act of waking in the deep middle of the night with nothing to do but exist. So next time you wake at 3 a.m. and lie there unexpectedly alert, thoughts moving calmly through your mind, don't panic. Don't reach for your phone. Don't spiral into worry. Just lie there in the dark for a while. Think whatever needs thinking. Be awake the way your ancestors were awake. Quietly, completely, in the middle of a night that has always belonged to you. You're not malfunctioning, you're remembering.